The selection tools in Illustrator are the tools that are used most often within the program. The saying goes that in order to affect it, you have to select it. So all the more reason to become comfortable with the selection tools and how they work. Now I'm beginning this video with the flower.ai file already open on my computer. And what I'm going to do to start off on a very basic level is I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm going to click and drag to just draw a square in the upper left hand corner. I'm not really concerned with what color it is or anything like that. I just want to draw a real basic shape. Now I'm going to zoom in on that area. I'm going to use Command Spacebar on Mac or Control Spacebar on Windows, and I'll click and drag around that shape to zoom in on it. Now your selection tools are located up here at the top of your tools panel. And depending on which configuration you're viewing, you'll either see them stacked on top of one another or side by side. Now the most basic tool that you could use is something called the selection tool. And with the selection tool, you can click on an object and you'll see that it gives you a bounding box around the entire shape. And it doesn't really matter what shape you're clicked on, these handles will show up and they allow you to, as you can see, rotate the object. If I click around one of the corners, you can drag one of the side handles to distort it in one way, shape, or form. And you can just overall move the entire object as a unit. Now, conversely, we can use the direct selection tool. And you can see that right now on my screen, I have the group selection tool active. But by default, if I click and hold on it, you'll see that you'll be accessing the direct selection tool. And the direct selection tool's job is to directly select the individual components that make up the overall object or path. So you'll notice if I click off of this and I click back on it, instead of seeing the handles that we saw on every side and every corner, we are now seeing the points that make up the path as a unit. Now if I click off of it and I click directly on one of these corners, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit to make it a little bit easier to see. You'll notice here that now I have one point of the path selected. Notice that this point over here is white, indicating that it is not selected. And using this direct selection tool, you can click on one or more of these points, and you can drag to distort and modify the overall shape. So I use the analogy of a box of things on your desk. If you grab the box, you're picking up the box and everything inside of it. And that's really how the selection tool works. But if I reach in the box and I grab individual items found within the box, that's kind of what the direct selection tool is doing. You'll see that I can click on each individual component that makes up this overall path and change its overall shape. So any one of these can be moved or modified. I can also marquee around more than one, and then that will move both of these at the same time. So you can see there's quite a difference between these two tools, and understanding how they work is really going to help you in choosing which one you want to use. Now I'm going to press Command 0 on Mac or Control 0 on Windows to fit my artboard to my window. And if you still have this highlighted, you're going to notice that if you click on just one of the anchor points and I press delete, it's only going to delete that point. But again, if I click on it with my selection tool and press delete, it's going to delete the whole unit. So let's take a look at a more practical example. If I click on one of these leaves of the flower, these solid blue leaves here, you can see that with the selection tool, I can click on this. I can drag it to kind of change its orientation. I can click on each individual one to just kind of change its overall appearance. Oops, I grabbed the wrong thing there. I'm going to undo that. Click on this leaf, drag it out, and you'll see that each one of these is an individual element. Now, when you click on it with the selection tool, you're modifying that whole object. And of course, if you wanted to, you could rotate these objects a little bit to create some randomness here. And that's the job of that selection tool. Now again, if I click on this with the direct selection tool, this allows me to click on individual anchor points to distort them in totally different ways, because now I'm modifying the path, not just the overall shape, which is pretty cool when you're working with your artwork. Now, in addition, I'm going to grab my selection tool, and I'm going to click on these leaves out here. And in this case, we're selecting an entire group. So again, the job of the selection tool is to select the overall object as a unit. Now, if I switch to the direct selection tool, and I click off of this, I am able to click on each individual component to modify it within that group if I want to. So again, that gives you even more power when you're working here. Now, if you click and hold on the direct selection tool, you can move to the group selection tool. And the job of the group selection tool is several-fold. One is, if I click off of this and I click on an element within the group, it'll only select that particular element, right? Now, so far, so good. Pretty much the same as your direct selection tool. But with an object within a group selected, if you click on it again, it's going to select the group that that item is a member of. And if you click on that again, it will select the group that that group is a member of. Now, in this particular example, this inner ring of leaves is one group, the outer ring of leaves is another group, and then both of them have been grouped together as one single unit. This can often be a little bit frustrating when you're working with artwork that is grouped together in a complex fashion like that. That's what makes the group selection tool so useful, because if I wanted to only select this outer ring group, I can click on one of its items, click on it again, and now I have that whole group selected. So if I wanted to make a color change or something, I could simply choose maybe a darker color to apply that color to every item within that group. As you can see, it's important to understand the role of each of the selection tools. Knowing how to use these effectively will save you time when working with basic and complex objects inside of Illustrator CS6.